So the tweet is, my bank was shut down because it was allegedly insolvent, and to send a message to Puerto Rico that would not tolerate money laundering. But in reality, my bank was likely the most solvent bank in Puerto Rico and did more to combat money laundering than any other Puerto Rican bank. How does that make you feel now looking back at that and seeing what's after happening and the fact that you did take those
Well, it's
precautionary measures?
well, it's obviously very frustrating, and I'm a little bit limited in what
Of
I can
course.
discuss because we're now in the middle of discovery, and so there's a lot of information that I now have that I wish I could share, but I have to wait until everything is submitted into evidence, and I have no idea how long that's going to take. But it is very frustrating because we made a significant investment in compliance. I did in the bank, millions of dollars spent on compliance. We turned down 75% of our account applicants. We closed the accounts along the way. We removed from consideration a broad category of potential applicants that never even were able to apply because we tried to limit the potential that somebody would use the account to try to avoid taxes or launder money. In fact, during the account opening process, if anybody even mentioned to one of our onboarding specialists or one of our compliance people, and by the way, we had 65 people who worked at the bank, 30 of them were in compliance. I mean, that shows you how ridiculous it was. I had one person in marketing and 30 people in compliance. So compliance was the single most important aspect of the bank. It was the biggest cost that the bank had. And if you tried to open up an account at the bank and you even suggested that a goal was to avoid taxes, that would end the account opening process right there. I mean, you couldn't even let somebody know that, tax avoidance, not even evasion.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing
Legal
even
tax
wrong
avoidance.
with, right. But if you even told somebody that you were trying to avoid taxes and that's why you wanted this account, I mean, that was it. There was no account. So we were very, very strict. And of course, we got audited. I didn't realize it was this group of 5 nations, the J5, because when the government initially came to my bank and they came to my house, they lied to me about the purpose of the investigation. They told me that they were investigating customers of the bank, not the bank itself. In fact, I asked them, are you investigating the bank? And they said no, right? So they lied to me because I later found out, like two and a half years later, that they were investigating the bank, that it was all BS. But during the course of the investigation, they looked at thousands of accounts. They wanted to look at all the accounts, but my lawyer at least got them to limit it to a couple of thousand, which was still a lot. But it was a 2-year process, and they couldn't find any examples where the bank did anything wrong as far as facilitating money laundering or tax evasion. In fact, not only did they not find that the bank did anything wrong, they have since opened up all kinds of investigations against the bank's customers. And to my knowledge, they haven't even found that any of our customers did anything wrong. But obviously that wouldn't have even involved the bank, right? Because the bank would have had no knowledge of it. So we did such a good job. Yet we were the target of this, media campaign that was spearheaded by Australia, 60 Minutes, The Age, but then involved the New York Times, where they accused me of using my bank to help criminals launder money and evade taxes without having any evidence to suggest that that was true. And then once the government completed their investigation, they found no evidence. In fact, the only evidence they found was of a bank that, went above and beyond. If you look at what people have said about my bank, people who have actually had accounts, they said that they've never experienced compliance like that they've been, having bank accounts for 20, 30 years. They have accounts all over the world with some of the biggest banks, and no bank did the kind of due diligence that my bank did, not only on the onboarding process, but every time you tried to use your account, every time you tried to make a transaction. We scrutinized those transactions to a greater degree than any bank in the world. And people said that that was the case. And a lot of people ended up closing their accounts because they were so frustrated by all that compliance. But a lot of people put up with it and they said it was a pain in the ass, but they put up with it because they liked the other things that the bank did, like it was fully reserved, 100% reserve bank. And we offered a lot of services that other banks didn't offer. So people thought, you know what, they have all this extra compliance, but it's worth it because, it's a really, really good bank. And so to have been accused like that and then ultimately shut down to send an example, right? The IRS agent that came to this press conference said that this is sending an example that Puerto Rico won't tolerate tax evasion and money laundering. Well, but my bank didn't facilitate that. Puerto Rico didn't find any evidence either. Neither did the J5. So how does shutting down the most compliant bank in the country prove, send any kind of message? But of course, when they shut down my bank, the regulators said it had nothing to do with money laundering or tax evasion. It had nothing to do with this J5, even though they had a whole press conference so the J5 could claim credit for the bank being shut down and pretend that its failed investigation was a success. But the reason that was given, that the bank was shut down, the OSIF commissioner twice said the bank was insolvent. In fact, she said it was critically insolvent. Now, the bank wasn't insolvent at all, let alone critically. The bank had no loans and the bank had no debt, right? My bank didn't borrow any money from anybody and it didn't loan any money to anybody. So all the money that we had collected from customers was sitting there in cash. And we had millions in cash, more than we owed. Well, we only had like 67 million left. But when the bad publicity came out in October of 2020, that began kind of like a slow motion run on the bank. A lot of people started taking their money out of the bank. They were afraid to have their money there. And then a lot of our counterparties refused to do business with us. And so we couldn't provide the type of services that people wanted. And so
let me ask you this, Peter.
We lost about, let me just finish this. So the bank returned over $200 million to customers, withdrawal. And that was about 75% of the bank's total deposits. No other bank probably could have done that without going bankrupt. But since we didn't make any loans, every time a customer wanted their money back, we gave it to them, no problem. And on the day that the Puerto Rican regulators put my bank into receivership, under the pretense that it was insolvent, on that day, we could have sent every customer back every penny they had on deposit. And we could have paid all the past due or outstanding bills because all we had was normal bills. We didn't have any debt, right? No, we hadn't borrowed any money. So the bank was totally solvent, yet it was put into receivership under the care of a guy, a trustee, who had zero banking experience. The guy that was put in charge of my bank had never worked at a bank, had no experience in banking. And now it's been almost 16 months since they put my bank unnecessarily into receivership because it was supposedly insolvent, even though it was completely solvent. And over those 16 months, they haven't returned one penny. So that there's like $67 million that has been trapped in my bank under the care of the Puerto Rican government for 16 months. No one's gotten any money. And I have no clarity as to when anyone's going to get any money. So when I owned the bank, anybody who wanted money could get it. When the government took over the bank to protect the customers, no customer has gotten any money in 16 months. And meanwhile, I had sold my bank to a publicly traded U.S. company based out of Texas who was going to operate it. They were going to infuse it with millions and millions of dollars of additional capital. They were bringing highly experienced bankers to Puerto Rico to run it. They were going to expand it. It was going to be a very good thing for the country. Yet for some reason, the head of Puerto Rico said, we don't want that. We don't want this bank to be operated. We want it shut down. We want it liquidated. It makes no sense. What regulator in their right mind would do that? And of course, in the process, I lost the money that I was going to get. I mean, I was going to get about $25 million from the buyer who was going to pay me for my asset, which was worth a lot more than that, I think, before, it lost 75% of its customers and its reputation was destroyed by these false allegations. But I was able to salvage something. And then the Puerto Rican government said, no, Peter, you can't have anything. You have to dismantle that asset. You have to lose every penny that you put in. I put in $10 million cash, right? I put that in out of my own pocket as capital, and I lost every penny of it. For what? For what reason? The government took it all away from me. I never had a trial, never had a hearing. I didn't do anything wrong. But this is what happened. But it was all, I think all of this was orchestrated so the media can pretend that I did something wrong. And so the government could claim credit for something that they shouldn't get any credit for. But I think the main reason that they went after me and went after my bank was because of my politics, because of my public criticism of the Fed, of central banking, of the IRS, of the Patriot Act, and a lot of these anti-money laundering laws that I abided by. You see, I abided by all these laws, but I was very critical of the laws themselves because having to abide by them, I knew how disruptive they were, how onerous they were, how anti-competitive they were. I mean, these were terrible rules and regulations that I was complying with, and I thought that they should have been repealed. But, the government, I guess, assumed that, well, because I criticized the laws, I must break them. But no, it was because I was following the laws that I knew how much damage they were doing firsthand.
This was a short clip from Kickoff Sessions podcast. Go check out the full episode right up here.